The Angkor Wat stegosaurus. Deep in Cambodia's jungles stands Ta Prohm, a temple complex built in 1186 AD as part of Angkor Wat. The temple walls are covered with intricate carvings depicting local fauna: deer, monkeys, parrots, water buffalo. But one carving is different. One carving shows an animal that shouldn't exist. Carved into the temple wall, surrounded by familiar animals, is an unmistakable image of a stegosaurus. The creature is shown in profile with distinctive plates running down its back, a small head, thick legs, and a heavy tail. The proportions are correct. The posture is correct. The plate placement matches what paleontologists determined Stegosaurus looked like, except this temple was built in 1186 AD, and Stegosaurus went extinct approximately 150 million years ago. First brought to widespread attention in the 1990s, scholars initially assumed it must be something else, perhaps a rhinoceros with decorative elements or a stylized chameleon. But detailed analysis revealed problems. The creature has plates, not horns. It has 4 legs of similar length, not a rhinoceros's distinctive body shape. Every detail matches Stegosaurus anatomy. No living animal fits this description. The carving appears in a series of circular medallions, each containing a different animal. The Stegosaurus medallion is identical in size and style to those depicting elephants and deer, animals the Khmer people saw daily. It's presented as just another animal, with no indication the artists considered it mythological. What's remarkable is the specific dinosaur type. The Stegosaurus isn't a generic dragon shape that might result from finding large bones. It's a specific species with distinctive backplates that could only be rendered accurately by someone who had seen the complete animal. Modern paleontology didn't reconstruct Stegosaurus until the late 19th century, based on North American fossils. The first complete skeleton wasn't assembled until 1910, over 700 years after the Ta Prohm carving. How did 12th century Cambodian artists accurately depict an animal that science wouldn't reconstruct for another 700 years? Stegosaurus fossils have never been found in Southeast Asia. For Cambodian artists to base their carving on fossils, they would need to travel halfway around the world, discover and excavate remains, and accurately reconstruct the animal, all without leaving any record. The alternative explanation is more disturbing. The carving is based on direct observation. Either Stegosaurus survived far longer than science believes, or humans existed much earlier than our timeline suggests. The Ta Prohm Stegosaurus sits in plain sight, visited by thousands annually, yet has no satisfactory explanation. How did 12th century artists carve an accurate Stegosaurus 150 million years after extinction? The Mesopotamian Sirush. On Babylon's Ishtar Gate, built around 575 BC under King Nebuchadnezzar II, appears a creature called the Sirush, a dragon-like animal depicted among the city's sacred beasts. While other creatures are clearly stylized versions of known animals, lions and bulls, the Sirush is different. It appears to be an accurate representation of an animal that supposedly went extinct 65 million years ago. The Sirush is depicted with a long neck and tail, horned head, scaly body, and legs like a feline with bird-like talons. But it's not a fantastical hybrid randomly combined. The anatomy is internally consistent, proportions realistic, and posture suggests a creature that could actually function. Most telling is how it's depicted, not as a mythological monster, but as just another animal shown alongside lions and bulls in the same style. What struck paleontologists was how closely the Sirush resembles certain theropod dinosaurs. The body plan matches sauropods, while the feet and posture suggest familiarity with bipedal dinosaurs. The combination is oddly specific and anatomically plausible. Ancient Babylonians seem to consider the Sirush a real animal. It appears on cylinder seals, temple art, and religious texts, but always as a living animal associated with the god Marduk, never as mythological. Ancient texts describe the Sirush dwelling in Mesopotamian marshes, suggesting the Babylonians believed it was contemporary, not ancient legend. Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Babylon in the 5th century BC, recorded that priests kept a great serpent in the temple, which they claimed was a living Sirush. While dismissed as legend, it suggests Babylonians believed such creatures existed in their own time. The Book of Daniel describes a great dragon worshipped in Babylon, which Daniel killed. While interpreted as religious allegory, the account specifically identifies the creature as a living animal kept by priests, the same claim Herodotus recorded. The conventional explanation is that Babylonians discovered dinosaur fossils and reconstructed what the animal looked like. But the surush doesn't look like a partially reconstructed fossil. It looks like a complete, living animal rendered by someone familiar with its appearance. Ancient peoples who discovered large fossils typically interpreted them as giants or mythological creatures, not unknown species. What's most puzzling is the anatomical accuracy. The Sirush's proportions, posture, and structure are all realistic for a large reptile. Unlike medieval dragons with impossible features, the Sirush could plausibly exist. It looks like an animal that was observed, not imagined. The reconstructed Ishtar Gate now resides in Berlin's Pergamon Museum, where the Sirush can be viewed alongside Babylonian lions and bulls. 3 animals rendered in identical style, yet 2 existed, and one supposedly couldn't have. The Ica stones of Peru. In the 1960s, Dr. Javier Cabrera, a Peruvian physician, began collecting unusual stones brought by local farmers. The stones, ranging from pebbles to massive boulders, were covered with engravings depicting scenes that should be impossible, humans interacting with dinosaurs. The Ica stones show humans hunting, riding, and performing surgery on dinosaurs, species including recognizable Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, and Pteranodon. The engravings are detailed and specific, showing accurate anatomical details that wouldn't be known until modern paleontology. Dr. Cabrera amassed over 15,000 stones covering astronomy, medicine, continental maps, and advanced technologies. The dinosaur depictions drew the most controversy. Some stones show humans examining sauropods with magnifying glasses. Others depict surgical procedures. The detail suggests sophisticated culture with advanced knowledge. Critics immediately declared them hoaxes, arguing farmers created stones to sell to tourists. In 1975, facing legal action, the farmers admitted they had carved them, but they later recanted, claiming the government forced them to lie to avoid prosecution. They insisted the stones had been found in caves and riverbeds. What complicates the hoax theory is the sheer number. 15,000 plus stones would require decades of full-time work. The engravings show consistent artistic style across all stones, suggesting single cultural tradition rather than modern forgeries. Moreover, many stones were documented in collections and museums long before the 1960s, some dating to the 1500s when Spanish conquistadors first noted them. Chemical analysis produced contradictory results. Some tests suggest ancient engravings with oxidation patterns consistent with great age. Other tests suggest recent creation. The testing methods remain controversial. What's undeniable is that some Ica stones are authentically ancient. Similar stones have been found in controlled archaeological excavations and exist in museums with documented provenance dating back centuries. The question isn't whether ancient Ica stones exist, they do. The question is whether dinosaur stones are part of that ancient tradition or modern additions. The dinosaur depictions are remarkably accurate. Several stones show Triceratops with correct horn number and placement, details not definitively established by paleontology until the 20th century. Other stones depict sauropods with correct proportions and posture, knowledge from modern fossil reconstruction. Cabrera noted many stones showed anatomical details of species not well known in the 1960s. Some appear to show dinosaur features paleontologists discovered only in recent decades. The Ica stones remain controversial. Mainstream archaeology dismisses them as modern hoaxes, while alternative researchers view them as evidence that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. What's clear is that someone created thousands of detailed stones showing humans interacting with anatomically accurate dinosaurs. The Aboriginal Dreamtime megafauna. In Australia's remote Arnhem Land, Aboriginal rock art sites contain paintings that appear to show extinct megafauna, massive animals that roamed Australia until around 40,000, 50,000 years ago. These aren't vague shapes. They're detailed depictions of specific species that science says humans couldn't have encountered. The most striking examples show Diprotodon, a massive wombat-like marsupial the size of a rhinoceros. The rock paintings depict an animal with correct body shape, proportions, and distinctive features like prominent snout. The paintings use techniques Aboriginal artists have employed for thousands of years, in styles consistent with ancient art. Other paintings show Genyornis, a large flightless bird standing over 6 feet tall. The depictions show a bird with massive body, thick legs, and small wings, matching fossil evidence for Genyornis exactly. What makes these paintings extraordinary is their age and accuracy. Aboriginal people have lived in Australia for at least 65,000 years, while megafauna extinctions occurred around 40,000, 50,000 years ago. This creates a potential 15,000 to 25,000 year overlap when humans and megafauna coexisted. If the paintings are accurate records, they would be the only visual documentation of these extinct animals made by people who witnessed them. The paintings show remarkable anatomical accuracy. Diprotodon images correctly depict the massive barrel-shaped body, plantigrade stance, and distinctive head shape. This isn't information easily derived from scattered fossil bones. It suggests observation of living animals. Some paintings show creatures in motion or interacting with their environment, providing behavioral details fossils can't reveal. Modern paleontology didn't reconstruct Diprotodon until the 20th century, yet Aboriginal rock art shows the same animal with the same proportions, created potentially tens of thousands of years ago. Aboriginal oral traditions support human megafauna contact. Dreamtime stories describe giant wombats, enormous birds, and massive reptiles matching extinct Australian megafauna. These aren't vague monster legends. They're specific descriptions with characteristics precisely matching what paleontologists learned from fossils. The stories describe where these animals lived, what they ate, and how they behaved. One intriguing aspect is that Aboriginal stories describe the extinction of these animals, often attributing disappearance to hunting pressure or environmental changes. These oral histories have been passed down through countless generations, suggesting memory of extinct animals survived in Aboriginal culture for potentially 40,000 years. Archaeological evidence supports overlap between humans and megafauna. Fossil sites have yielded evidence of human activity alongside megafauna remains. Some bones show butchering signs. The overlap appears real. The question is whether it lasted long enough for humans to create artistic records. The Aboriginal rock paintings may be exactly what they appear: eyewitness documentation of animals that are now extinct, created by people who saw them alive. If authenticated, they would be humanity's oldest wildlife documentation, predating European cave paintings by tens of thousands of years. The Paluxy River Tracks. In Glen Rose, Texas, the limestone bed of the Paluxy River contains hundreds of dinosaur footprints dating back approximately 113 million years to the Cretaceous period. The tracks are well documented and accepted by mainstream paleontology. But controversy erupted in the 1930s when locals claimed to find human footprints in the same rock layers as the dinosaur tracks, suggesting humans and dinosaurs walked the same ground at the same time. The alleged human prints appear in the same limestone formation as Acrocanthosaurus and sauropod tracks. Some prints show clear, elongated foot shapes with what appears to be toe impressions. The prints are the right size for human feet, show appropriate depth and pressure patterns, and appear in sequences suggesting bipedal walking. In the 1970s, creationist researchers heavily promoted the Paluxy tracks as proof that the Earth was young and that humans coexisted with dinosaurs. This brought intense scientific scrutiny. Mainstream paleontologists examined the tracks and concluded that most were either eroded dinosaur prints, natural erosion patterns, or deliberate carvings made to fool tourists during the Depression era. However, not all researchers were satisfied with these explanations. Some tracks show features difficult to explain, as erosion or carving. Several prints display compression ridges around the edges, features created when spill weight presses into soft sediment and pushes material up around the impression. These compression ridges are difficult to fake through carving and don't typically result from erosion. One particular track sequence shows what appears to be a human footprint directly inside a larger dinosaur track. The human print is deeper than the surrounding stone surface, suggesting it was made in the original soft sediment, not carved later. But the dinosaur print also shows authentic features, including proper depth variation and sediment displacement. The most intriguing aspect involves prints that were initially dismissed as erosion, but later revealed features when water levels changed. In the 1980s, during drought conditions, several prints became visible that hadn't been documented before. Some of these showed clearer toe impressions and anatomical details that made them harder to dismiss. Critics point out that many prints identified as human have proportions that don't quite match human feet. They're too elongated, too wide, or show toe placement that doesn't align with human anatomy. Some researchers argue these are actually dinosaur tracks from species that walked on their metatarsals, creating elongated impressions that superficially resemble human feet. The man tracks, as they're called locally, also include some obvious frauds. During the Depression, local residents carved fake tracks in loose stones to sell to tourists. These fakes have been identified and acknowledged. The question is whether all the controversial tracks are fakes, or whether some genuine anomalies exist among the frauds. Modern analysis using 3D scanning technology has revealed that several tracks show subsurface disturbance patterns consistent with weight compression in soft sediment rather than surface carving. This doesn't prove they're human prints, but suggests they're genuine traces of something, not crude fakes. One theory proposed by some geologists is that the human-like tracks might be dinosaur tracks that have been significantly eroded or infilled with sediment, creating shapes that coincidentally resemble human footprints. Limestone erosion can create unusual patterns, and selective weathering might explain some of the more controversial impressions. The Paluxy River tracks remain controversial. Mainstream science firmly rejects claims of human prints in Cretaceous limestone, pointing to the overwhelming evidence that humans didn't exist 113 million years ago. But a small number of researchers continue to argue that some tracks remain unexplained and deserve serious investigation beyond ideological dismissals. Whether the Paluxy tracks represent misidentified dinosaur prints, erosion patterns, deliberate fakes, or something more mysterious, they've become a battleground where scientific methodology clashes with alternative historical theories. The debate continues, with each side pointing to evidence that seems compelling from their perspective. The Thunderbird petroglyphs. Across North America, from southwest deserts to Pacific Northwest forests, Native American petroglyphs depict massive birds called thunderbirds. According to indigenous traditions, these weren't mythological creatures. They were real animals people encountered and feared. The descriptions are so specific and consistent across tribes that researchers have asked, could thunderbirds have been pterosaurs that survived into the human era? Physical descriptions from Native American traditions are remarkably consistent. They describe enormous flying creatures with wingspans of 15-20 feet or more, leathery rather than feathered wings, long beaks, and ability to carry off large animals. The creatures created thunder with wing beats and lightning with their eyes, likely poetic descriptions of tremendous noise these massive creatures would make. The petroglyphs show similar features. Rather than depicting birds with feathered wings, many thunderbird images show creatures with triangular or bat-like wings. The proportions are wrong for any known bird. Wings too large relative to body, heads too big and long-beaked. But the proportions are correct for pterosaurs. At Utah's Black Dragon Canyon, a pictograph shows multiple figures appearing to be pterosaurs in flight. The creatures have characteristic pterosaur silhouette, large heads, long beaks, wings attached to elongated fingers, and small bodies. The image dates between 1,000 and 4,000 years ago. In California's San Rafael Swell, petroglyphs show flying creatures with features matching pteranodon, one of the largest pterosaur species. The long head crest, wingspan to body ratio, and flight posture all align with what paleontologists determined pteranodon looked like. Yet these petroglyphs were created centuries before modern humans had any concept of pterosaurs. Native American oral traditions provide additional details. Many tribes have stories of giant flying creatures living in caves or on cliff faces, hunting large prey, and extremely dangerous to humans. The Lakota tell of the Wakinyan, immense birds whose wing beats cause thunder. The Ojibwe speak of the anatomically, creatures so large they could darken the sky. What makes these accounts intriguing is their geographic distribution. Thunderbird legends exist across virtually all Native American cultures, coast to coast. While details vary, the core description remains consistent: massive flying creatures, larger than any known bird, with aggressive behavior. This consistency across cultures with limited contact suggests a common source, possibly encounters with actual animals. Could pterosaurs have survived in North America until recent centuries? The scientific consensus is firmly negative. Pterosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. But the fossil record is incomplete, and large flying creatures could potentially avoid fossilization in areas where conditions weren't conducive. The alternative is that Native Americans discovered pterosaur fossils and reconstructed what the animals looked like. But this seems unlikely. Pterosaur fossils are extremely rare and fragile. The reconstructions are remarkably accurate, matching modern paleontological understanding. The Thunderbird petroglyphs represent one of archaeology's enduring mysteries. Either Native Americans created remarkably accurate pterosaur depictions based on fossil discoveries, or they based their art on direct observation of animals supposedly extinct millions of years before humans existed. The Chinese dragon problem. Chinese dragon imagery dates back over 4,000 years, appearing on jade carvings, bronze vessels, and stone monuments. While Western dragons are malevolent monsters, Chinese dragons were considered real animals, powerful, rare, but natural creatures that occasionally interacted with humans. The consistency of Chinese dragon descriptions has led some researchers to ask, were Chinese dragons based on surviving dinosaurs? The earliest Chinese dragons from the Neolithic period and early Bronze Age don't look like elaborate creatures of later imperial art. They're simpler, more anatomically realistic, and oddly specific. These early dragons have long necks, small heads, powerful bodies, and thick tails. Exactly the body plan of sauropod dinosaurs. One intriguing piece of evidence is the dragon bones used in traditional Chinese medicine. For centuries, Chinese apothecaries sold dragon bones ground into powder. When Western paleontologists investigated in the early 20th century, they discovered they were dinosaur fossils. The question is, did ancient Chinese people dig up fossils and decide they were dragon remains? Or did they encounter actual dragons and later, when animals disappeared, start using fossils as substitutes? Historical Chinese texts treat dragons as rare but real animals. They describe dragons living in rivers and lakes, coming out during storms, and occasionally being captured or killed. These aren't mythological accounts. They read like natural history, with specific details about behavior, habitat, and anatomy. Tang Dynasty texts from the 7th-8th centuries AD describe dragons with remarkable specificity. They note dragons have scales like fish, claws like eagles, but bodies more like snakes with legs. They describe how dragons swim, move on land, and interact with their environment. Some texts mention dragon flesh being occasionally eaten, with descriptions of taste and texture. What's particularly striking is how Chinese dragon anatomy evolved over time. Early dragons are simple and realistic. Later dragons become more elaborate, with horns, flowing whiskers, and supernatural abilities. This progression suggests early depictions might have been based on observation of real animals, while later versions became increasingly stylized as actual animals became extinct. The Shu Yi Ji, compiled in the 4th century AD, records a dragon falling from the sky during a thunderstorm and being examined by local officials before dying. The description is oddly mundane. The creature is measured, features documented, body preserved. This reads like a naturalist's report, not mythological tale. Modern paleontology has discovered that China has some of the world's richest dinosaur fossil deposits. Many new species have been discovered, including long-necked sauropods that match traditional dragon descriptions remarkably well. Could ancient Chinese people have encountered living representatives of these species? The Chinese dragon problem has no easy solution. Either Chinese culture preserved accurate dinosaur descriptions based on fossil discoveries, or dragons were real animals that survived into historical times. The consistency of descriptions, treating dragons as natural beings, and anatomical accuracy of early depictions all suggest Chinese dragons might have been based on something real. The Nazca animal lines. High on Peru's coastal desert plateau, the Nazca lines stretch across nearly 200 square miles. Created between 500 BC and 500 AD, most lines form geometric patterns or depict animals known to the Nazca people: monkeys, hummingbirds, spiders. But several geoglyphs show creatures that don't match any known animal. One geoglyph, labeled as pelican or condor, shows a long-necked creature with disproportionately small head, heavy body, and what appears to be wings. But proportions are wrong for a bird. The neck is too long and thick, head too small, and body structure suggests a quadruped. When viewed with fresh eyes, the figure looks remarkably like a pterosaur. The geoglyph shows features consistent with pterosaur anatomy: long, thick neck, small head with what appears to be a crest, wing structures attaching to the body consistent with pterosaur flight mechanics, and robust body suggesting large animal. The proportions match pteranodon far better than any known bird. Another controversial figure is the monkey, though it bears little resemblance to South American monkeys. The creature has an extremely long, spiraling tail and unusual body proportions. Some researchers suggest it might represent a giant ground sloth, a megafauna species extinct around 10,000 years ago. If so, the Nazca people were depicting an animal extinct for millennia before their civilization. A third geoglyph, labeled the dog, doesn't match any canid species. It has a long body, short legs, and what appears to be a heavily scaled or plated back. The figure bears striking resemblance to a pangolin, but pangolins never existed in South America. However, glyptodonts, giant armored mammals, did live in South America and went extinct around 10,000 years ago. One possibility is that Nazca people discovered fossils and created geoglyphs based on interpretations. Peru has significant fossil deposits. However, creating accurate reconstructions of extinct animals based solely on fossil bones would have been extraordinarily difficult. Another possibility is that these geoglyphs represent stylized versions of known animals, and we're reading too much into artistic choices. The Nazca lines were created using simple techniques, and fine detail was impossible at such scale. But there's a third, more disturbing possibility. Some of these animals weren't extinct when the Nazca people created their geoglyphs. If megafauna survived in isolated regions longer than science believes, the Nazca people might have had access to oral traditions or rare encounters. South America is vast, with enormous areas that remain relatively unexplored even today. The Nazca animal lines continue generating controversy. While mainstream archaeology interprets them as stylized contemporary animals, anatomical peculiarities of several geoglyphs suggest something more mysterious. The Acámbaro figures. In 1944, in Acámbaro, Mexico, German merchant Waldemar Julsrud made a discovery that would ignite controversy lasting decades. While riding horseback, Julsrud noticed unusual clay figures eroding from a hillside. He hired local workers to excavate, and over several years, they unearthed over 33,000 ceramic figurines, including what appeared to be dinosaurs. The collection includes thousands showing recognizable dinosaur species: sauropods with long necks, theropods with bipedal stances, stegosaurs with dorsal plates, and creatures appearing to be pterosaurs. The figurines show these animals interacting with humans, people riding dinosaurs, feeding them, hunting them. What made the figures immediately controversial was their implications. If authentic, they would prove humans and dinosaurs coexisted, overturning everything science understands. The figurines appeared to come from the Chupiquaro culture, dating them to roughly 800 BC to 200 AD. Mainstream archaeology immediately declared them hoaxes. Critics argued Julesrud had been duped by locals who created and planted figurines. This seemed plausible. Julesrud was paying workers for each figurine, creating incentive to manufacture rather than discover. But several factors complicated the hoax theory. First was the sheer number. Over 33,000 pieces would require enormous effort. Second was stylistic consistency. All figurines showed similar artistic techniques, suggesting unified cultural tradition rather than modern forgeries. Third was discovery context. Many figurines were found deeply buried in undisturbed soil layers. Chemical analysis yielded confusing results. Some tests suggested ancient clay, with thermoluminescence dating indicating ages of several thousand years. Other tests were inconclusive or suggested recent manufacture. What's undeniable is that some Acambaro-style figurines have been found in controlled archaeological excavations separate from Julesrud's collection. Similar pieces have been discovered throughout Mexico, suggesting the artistic tradition was real and ancient. The dinosaur identifications present problems. Some figurines show remarkably accurate anatomy, correct proportions, proper stance, species-specific features. Others show creatures that don't match any known dinosaur, or combine features suggesting imagination rather than observation. Supporters point out that some figurines show dinosaur features not well known in the 1940s. Several pieces depict dinosaurs with more upright postures than were depicted in paleoart of that era, yet these portrayals have been validated by later research. Waldemar Julesrud died in 1964, maintaining until death that the figurines were authentic. His collection remains split between believers seeing evidence of human-dinosaur coexistence and skeptics seeing elaborate hoax. The Kachina Bridge Petroglyph. In Natural Bridges National Monument in Utah, beneath the massive Kachina Bridge, exists a petroglyph that has sparked debate since it was first widely photographed in the 1990s. The rock carving appears to show a sauropod dinosaur alongside other animal figures. The carving is attributed to ancestral Puebloan people who inhabited the region roughly 400–1500 AD. The petroglyph shows an animal with small head, on long neck, round body, 4 columnar legs, and long tail. The proportions and posture are consistent with sauropod dinosaurs, like Apatosaurus or Diplodocus. The figure appears alongside depictions of bighorn sheep and snakes the Puebloan people would have encountered. What makes this petroglyph particularly interesting is its context. It's not an isolated image easily dismissed. It's a carefully carved figure among other clearly representational animal depictions. Puebloan artists were skilled observers of nature, and their animal depictions are typically accurate and recognizable. Skeptics argue the figure isn't a dinosaur at all, but a stylized representation of a known animal, perhaps a bighorn sheep with exaggerated neck. However, the figure doesn't look like a sheep even with artistic license, and proportions don't match any animal native to the American Southwest. Another explanation is that the carving has been modified in modern times, that vandals added the neck and tail to an existing figure. However, analysis of the patina shows no evidence of recent carving. The entire figure appears to have the same age and weathering as surrounding petroglyphs. A third explanation is that ancestral Puebloan people discovered dinosaur fossils and created the petroglyph based on their interpretation. Utah has extensive dinosaur fossil deposits. However, reconstructing a dinosaur's appearance from scattered bones would be remarkably difficult. The petroglyph shows a complete, anatomically plausible animal. What complicates this explanation is that the petroglyph shows the dinosaur in a relatively modern pose. For decades, paleontologists depicted sauropods with dragging tails and sprawling legs. Recent research suggests sauropods held tails off the ground and stood more upright. The Kachina Bridge petroglyph shows this more upright posture, the posture modern paleontology recently validated as correct. The National Park Service takes no official position on whether the petroglyph depicts a dinosaur. Rangers present multiple interpretations and let visitors draw conclusions. This diplomatic approach acknowledges that while the dinosaur interpretation is controversial, it can't be definitively disproven. The Kachina Bridge petroglyph continues attracting attention from researchers, tourists, and alternative archaeology enthusiasts. Whatever it depicts, it reminds us that ancient people's artistic representations don't always fit neatly into our expectations. These 10 stone carvings represent an archaeological mystery that challenges fundamental assumptions about human history and the timeline of extinct species. From Cambodia to Peru, from China to North America, ancient people created detailed depictions of animals that supposedly vanished millions of years before humans existed. The evidence isn't circumstantial. We have a stegosaurus carved into a 12th century temple, anatomically correct and shown alongside contemporary animals. We have Mesopotamian art depicting dragon-like creatures with body plans matching theropod dinosaurs. We have thousands of Ica stones showing humans interacting with specific dinosaur species. We have Aboriginal rock art apparently documenting megafauna that died out thousands of years before the art was created. We have footprints in Texas limestone that some claim show humans walking alongside dinosaurs. Traditional explanations that ancient people discovered fossils and reconstructed extinct animals, or that these are imaginary creatures that happen to resemble dinosaurs, become unsatisfying when confronted with cumulative evidence. Ancient people creating accurate dinosaur reconstructions from scattered fossil bones would have required paleontological knowledge not developed until the 19th and 20th centuries. The anatomical accuracy is particularly troubling. The Ta-Prom stegosaurus shows correct plate arrangement. The Nazca lines include creatures with proportions matching extinct megafauna. Chinese dragons show postures and features consistent with sauropod dinosaurs. These aren't vague monster shapes. They're specific anatomical details suggesting knowledge of how these animals actually looked. 3 possibilities emerge, none comfortable. First, ancient people were far better at paleontology than we give them credit for. They found fossils, accurately reconstructed extinct animals from incomplete remains, and incorporated these into their art. This would require sophisticated understanding of comparative anatomy, capabilities making ancient people remarkably advanced scientifically. Second, some supposedly extinct animals survived far longer than science believes, existing in small populations into the era of human civilization. Ancient people created accurate depictions because they were observing living animals or had access to reliable oral traditions. This would require dramatic revision of our understanding of extinction timelines. Third, our timeline of human history is wrong. Humans or human ancestors existed far earlier than believed, overlapping with dinosaurs and other extinct animals. They observed these creatures, created art depicting them, and some survived to be found by modern humans. This would overturn fundamental assumptions about human evolution. None of these explanations fits comfortably within current scientific paradigms. Yet, the evidence exists, carved in stone, undeniable, and unexplained. Ancient people knew about animals they shouldn't have been able to know about. They created accurate depictions of creatures that went extinct millions of years before humans supposedly existed. Perhaps the question isn't which explanation is correct, but what combination of factors created this mystery. Maybe ancient people did discover fossils and made educated guesses that sometimes proved accurate. Maybe some oral traditions do preserve information across impossibly long timescales. Maybe a few species survived as living fossils longer than we think. Maybe our understanding of both human history and extinction timelines needs adjustment. What's certain is that these stone carvings exist. They're real, documented, and depict animals that challenge everything we think we know. Whether they represent sophisticated paleontological reconstruction, eyewitness documentation of surviving extinct species, or evidence of a human timeline far older than we imagine, they force us to acknowledge that ancient people knew things they shouldn't have been able to know. The stone carvings stand as permanent testimony to a mystery we haven't solved. Scattered across the globe, created by cultures separated by oceans and millennia, they tell the same impossible story. Ancient people knew about dinosaurs and extinct megafauna. They carved them in stone, painted them on walls, molded them in clay, and wove them into their mythologies. The carvings can't be erased or explained away. They exist, demanding explanation. And until we find that explanation, they remain as one of archaeology's most profound mysteries, evidence that the past is far stranger and far more complex than our current understanding allows.